I think I speak for the American people here. I presume, I take that presumption to speak for the American people here when I say, what exactly is this bombshell that Liz Cheney is talking about? What exactly is this smoking gun? Because what she did is she read, in the January 6th committee, she read a list of text messages that Mark Meadows, who was at the time, of course, President Trump's chief of staff, text messages he received on January 6th. These are texts from Fox News personalities like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Brian Kilmeade. These are text messages from Don Jr., obviously President Trump's son, all saying, condemning the violence, saying the president should speak out and condemn this loudly so it's not conflated with the peaceful protesters. Liz Cheney portrayed this as if it was an indictment on those sending the text messages, on the conservatives who were condemning the violence. And the mainstream media, of course, just picked up this narrative that this was some kind of bombshell revelation, these text messages were. And this clip, this video of Liz Cheney went viral. Take a look at this.
These text messages leave no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening here at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, "We are under siege here at the Capitol." Another, quote, "They have breached the Capitol." In a third, Mark, "Protesters are literally storming the Capitol, breaking windows on doors, rushing in. Is Trump going to say something?" A fourth, "There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door." And another from someone inside the Capitol, "We are all helpless." Dozens of texts, including from Trump administration officials, urged immediate action by the president. Quote, "POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed." In another, "Mark, he needs to stop this now." A third, in all caps, "Tell them to go home." A fourth, and I quote, "POTUS needs to calm this shit down." Indeed, according to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, "Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy," Laura Ingraham wrote. "Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished," Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, "Can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol," Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, "He's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough," Donald Trump Jr. texted.
All right, Senator, am I missing something here? Is this a smoking gun? Is this a bombshell?
No, not remotely. You had a bunch of folks saying violence is bad and the violence should stop. That should not be a smoking gun. I will say, you noted the confusion between Liz's and Liz's. I think in the future we'll simply refer to the greater Liz and the lesser Liz, and I'm very pleased the greater Liz is our co-host.
Well, thank you for that compliment. Let me just pivot to Michael. Does this not exonerate these folks that sent the text messages? Because these are people that have spent the last year facing accusations of encouraging or being complicit with this violence, and yet they proved that even behind the scenes, they were condemning this from moment one.
Of course, I don't really see what the story is. You had all of these prominent conservatives, some of whom were at Fox News, some of whom were lawyers, and they texted Mark Meadows, who's been on this program before, White House Chief of Staff, and they said, hey, the president should address the country, and then he addressed the country, and he said all that stuff, and that does not exactly seem like a man bites dog story to me. But Senator, you're there. You were there at the Capitol that day, and you're at the Capitol around these people every single day. What is the outcome of this January 6th commission if this is the best they've got?
Well, listen, I think you have to distinguish from the substance of the issue versus the politics of the issue. The substance, and it's very easy. In some ways, this reminds me of the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, where everything was so polarized that it was either 100% one direction or 100% the other direction. And I think this podcast was one of the few places that we tried to say, okay, let's assess what occurred. Let's assess what the facts are. If you look at January 6th, it's a little bit the same way, where if you listen to Democrats, if you listen to the corporate media, it was Pearl Harbor, it was 9/11, it was cats and dogs living together, Armageddon. I mean, it was the worst day in the history of the universe. On the other hand, there's some that defend January 6th as just another day that was perfectly fine. I view it somewhere in the middle, which is, I think, where reality lives. My view is straightforward. Violence is wrong. If you commit an act of violence, you should be prosecuted. If you violently assault a police officer, you should go to jail for a very, very long time. And I don't care if you're left wing or right wing or you don't have any wings at all. If you violently assault a cop, you're going to the slammer. That ought to be non-controversial. That ought to be real straightforward. What we see with January 6th, and the media right now is hyperventilating. I had multiple reporters stop me in the Capitol today and say, we want you to reflect on the anniversary of January 6th. And my response, I said, you know what? When I hear from Texans, I don't hear from Texans on that. What I hear from Texans on is they're upset about inflation. They're upset about the chaos at the open borders. They're upset about illegal vaccine mandates. They're upset about the disaster in Afghanistan and weak foreign policy. They're upset about all of the things that are impacting their lives and their families. But that doesn't fit with the political narrative. And Democrats seized upon the aftermath of that day to try to score political points. And so one of the ways they score political points is in language. And listen, language matters immensely in all forms of discourse, but especially political communication. The word insurrection. What nonsense. Insurrection? This wasn't an army that like was trying to conquer America. I mean, like insurrection is, we had an insurrection. It was called the Civil War. 600,000 people died. That was an insurrection. Really bad one.